Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Living Astrology with Janet. It's time to grab your cup of coffee or your tea, sit back and relax while we chat about what is happening in the sky above us for the weekend. Happy Friday, everyone. It's always good to be with you just before we get a weekend. And it is a big weekend, especially if you are a Seahawks fan or a Patriots fan or even just a football fan, as this is Super Bowl weekend. Woo! Now, you may be wondering why I don't have my Seahawks gear on, and that's because I just thought I'd save that for tomorrow and Sunday. Tomorrow, we're actually headed to a birthday party on the islands, and then I have a chance to be on the ferry where there will likely be a whole bunch of people who are Seahawks fans on that ferry headed over to Friday Harbor. So, welcome and thank you for being here with me today. We really have a quiet astrological weekend. And I was wondering as I was preparing the show this morning, like, how am I going to use up an hour's worth of time? But we always do seem to make it. So, okay. And yet, there, when I come on the broadcast and I start to talk about astrology, what I'm telling you is about what's happening either in this moment or in the next few days, assuming that you'd already heard, what's been happening already during the week. So, for example, this week we've had Uranus, the planet of rebellion and surprises and awakening and liberation, change from retrograde motion to forward motion, which means that in the the spin of the planets, it's now moving in a direction that makes change and liberation a part of our outer world experience. And then this is also his last time, at least for the next 84 years, of being in the sign of Taurus. So we're completing something, and that just doesn't go away because it happened on Tuesday or Wednesday. It sticks with us, and we take that energy with us forward as he begins the last 3 degrees movement through the sign of Taurus. So those of you out there who are Taurus or have Taurus prominent in your charts, you're coming to the end of a 7 to 8 year process of liberation in some way, or the Taurus part of your chart is being released from something or liberated in some way. And then, of course, in April, he moves on into the sign of Gemini, where he will spend the next 7 years kind of changing up the atmosphere of the sign of Gemini. And that requires us to be more mindful of our communication and things like that. So, the point, of even bringing this up is that, we may have a quiet weekend ahead of us, at least as far as we're adding to the cup of things that are going on, but there's still been a bunch of things that are going on for this week. So that prompts me to ask the question for all of you, how's it going, right? What's going on in your lives? Where are you feeling this very, very prominent pressure for 2026 of getting into your own skin and becoming your sovereign self and creating your future based on what it is that you desire being an operative word for the weekend? And how's that going, right? Are you bumping up against old tapes running in your mind? Are you bumping up against the I can't, or I should, or I would have, but I didn't, and all these different things, the recriminations and all of those, moments in your life where you didn't do what it is you needed to do? Now, if you're interested in understanding what's coming for 2026, which, by the way, the calendar year has already begun, but the astrological year has not yet begun. And so I kind of plopped the astrology of 2026 in February because it's the bridge month, right? It's the bridge between the old and the new. And that webinar is on April, my Lord. It's on February 21st at 9 a.m. Pacific time, and that would be noon East Coast time. And it's on a Saturday this time. I was wondering how a Saturday webinar would land with people. Is that easier for you to come to? Or what? But even if you purchase the webinar, which by the way is $25, you get the recording of that in case you don't make it to the live one. And there's so much to talk about in 2026. And a lot of it not necessarily new, but the tempo, oh my gosh, the tempo has increased in terms of pushing us in a certain direction, a
Mhm.
direction of values, a direction of living your passion and your desires, of being responsible for yourself and the position and the way that you find yourself in your life, and responsible to align with your values. And it seems like a lot of shadow energy is up in our faces for the year ahead for us to heal. And even the magic planet Chiron is going to make a sign change in 2026. As Uranus moves out of Taurus, the very next month, Taurus becomes home to Chiron for the next 6 to 8 years. So we have, a continuation of some of those Taurian themes, but through the lens of wounding and scarcity and the fear of not being enough, not having enough. And that'll be interesting for us to see, I think, for the future. So if you want to join us, please do. The link is there. You might have to copy and paste it because I'm not sure if it's on screen, if you can actually, if it turns into a link or not. But I've also got it in the chat. And if you copy and paste it from there, you can sign up to be part of it. And I also am doing charts for people. Now, I won't have time probably to do any kind of individual readings during that webinar, but I am going to do people's individual charts so you could see where the hot zones are in your life for the coming year, right? So you can kind of bring it in to the personal you. All right. So let's say good morning to people who've been checking in. I first saw my husband out there. Hello, Mr. Terry. And then I saw Tom. How are you doing out there, Tom? It's good to see you. And then Nicole Markham. Good to have you with us, Nicole. Christine Buckingham. Good morning to you. Teddy Hickox. Go Hawks. Julie. Good morning. And Julie, please look for an email that I sent you earlier this week. I'd like to finish or get you in for your third of 3 sessions. And Leilani, good to have you with us this morning from Hawaii. It must be awfully early there for you. And let's see, it's me, Namira. Hello, Namira. Great to have you with us. Terry Strauss, love you. She said, oh, you look so spring-like. This is your best color. And your hair is very cute. So this is what I did with my hair. There's like a clip here, and I just like shoved it up because I was totally uninspired about my hair. Maybe that's the best way to be in the morning, uninspired. And no, the 17th, or is this different? No, honey, it is on the 21st. The 17th is the solar eclipse that is happening, right? So maybe because you and I've talked about the solar eclipse, and we've also talked about the webinar, of course, because it was your idea for me to do it then. And Sarah Ravenseye, great to have you with us this morning, too. So for those of you who are joining me live here this morning, we are going to be talking about what happens when the mind softens. And no, I don't mean that like you go daft or you go, crazy. I mean that as in what happens when the mind releases itself from all the chatter, from all the, the loud cacophony of voices that are in there. And that is what we're looking to experience as we begin today, a transit of Mercury moving through the sign of Pisces. Now, when I pulled the chart up this morning, let me share it on my screen. When I pulled the chart up this morning, I noticed that Mercury right now, or at that moment, which was 7:21 my time, Mercury was at the 29th degree of of Aquarius. So he's still in the Aquarian part of the chart, but he's at a karmic degree and offering us an opportunity to look backwards over the previous 3.5 weeks of his transit through Aquarius. And wherever Aquarius is in your chart, how does that play out, right? How has that been playing out for you? Where the mind could be more future oriented, where the ideas of future technology and your mind and how it works have all been uppermost in our minds. And also where we're taking a look at how does emotion play a role in who we are being, and how does that impact our minds. So that's been the Aquarian experience of Mercury. And plus, it's been a huge experience because it's not only Mercury that's there. If you look at the sign here on the left side of the chart, the 9 o'clock, let's say, position of the chart, you notice Pluto and Mars, the ascendant, the sun, Venus, Mercury, all still in the sign of Aquarius, right? But getting ready to make their moves out of Aquarius and which has a very mind edge to it because it's an air sign, right? So it's very mind oriented. And all of that energy starting to head down toward Pisces. So that changes up, right? Everything, because now Mercury is moving into an area of emotional truth, of intuition, of instinct, of spirit, of the dreamland or the dreamscape. And as Mercury moves into the sign of Pisces, he moves into it in the gate 30, which the gate 30 is on the emotional solar plexus in your human design. And that happens to be called the gate of passion or the gate of desire. And in human design, that particular gate happens to be a red flag gate because it really like brings to the surface and brings out in very powerful ways the wants, the needs, the desires that we have as individuals. And then how does that hunger take over and create kind of an issue for us when we're moving forward in our lives? And you know, the more that you hunger for something, the less detached you are, which means the more that you're trying to narrow the field of the experience, which of course then the universe can't bring you the highest expression of what could be. So Mercury first moving into that particular gate, and as you'll see as we move on this morning, Venus is also in that gate, right? Venus is here as well. So they're kind of laying this template, this groundwork for us to really get clear about what we want, but then to hold it lightly, right? Not to strangle hold it, but just to hold it lightly. And kind of with an air of like, well, what's the best that could happen? You know, what more, how could this get any better? You know, those kinds of questions that just say, okay, this is what I'm looking for. This is what I desire, but I'm standing back and I'm watching how this could be the best that it could be. Okay. So it's really interesting. So while this is a lighter week astrologically, as we look ahead, lighter doesn't mean empty, right? It's not empty because we have had this whole week's worth of stuff going on. And then on the weekend, we have two powerful kinds of things happening. But when the sky gets quiet, it's our opportunity for the psyche to speak more clearly, right? There's some very interesting thing that happens when we're not being barraged by one after the other kind of aspect or configuration. We get this opportunity to shift more inward, maybe, or even if we're not shifting inward so much, we just get to see a quieter world around us, which means that we have a greater bandwidth for choices and what it is that we want to do. So this is a weekend, you know, with Mercury moving into Pisces and Venus squaring Uranus. Those are the two biggies for the weekend, where clarity doesn't come from your thinking harder or thinking more. It comes from listening differently to the voice, listening differently to the universe and to what happens to be around you. So now let's break down Mercury for a moment. And I know most of you know what Mercury represents: the mind, communication, and what's going to change when he later today moves into the sign of Pisces. And you know, in as well as Mercury being about how we think and how we speak, it's also about how we process and make meaning out of the things that we see happening in our personal lives, but also in our outer lives. So it has a lot to do with perception. And you can put two people in the room together and each one will perceive the same event differently, right? And that's partly because of their own personal Mercuries, but also maybe what's in Pisces for one person, what's in Pisces for the other person, and what houses those particular signs fall in. So Mercury kind of points out to us that we have a myriad of perceptions that can happen based on the individual and the shape of their chart. And not only the shape of their chart, but the shape of their lives, right? What is the thinking processes that they've taken on? What are the patterns and the habits that you got into when it comes to certain things that happen in your life? Like, our reaction if you get a piece of mail that tells you suddenly owe $500 on something and you didn't expect that. And maybe at the moment, you don't even have $500 in your checking account to pay that, right? What's the natural response or the perception that you have? And how is that different from everybody else? So perception is very important when it comes to Mercury. Now, when Mercury moves into Pisces, the languaging changes, right? The whole way that we think changes, the way that we speak changes, imperceptibly maybe to some, but also perceptibly, in some situations. In Pisces, language becomes symbolic. So Mercury may drive dreams, right? Our dreams, and how our dreams become largely symbolic of what's happening beneath the surface within us, or what our perceptions are, or the need for change in our perceptions. Now, also, thoughts move in images and feelings, as Pisces is a water sign, not an air sign, right? In the air sign of Aquarius, Mercury's been much more about the words and information and media and networks and, conversation. But Mercury in Pisces is going to be much more about the feeling behind the words, and how it is that we converse with others through feeling and imagery and so forth. Logic loosens when Mercury moves into Pisces, because intuition strengthens. And, in human design, I just think it's so eloquent how we see that there are these three ways of knowing. The world itself outwardly seems to run on logic, right? If you are someone that's in school, or all of us have been through schooling, we were taught to look at the world logically, through critical thinking, through proof, through science, right? That science being an art of logic. When we are talking about human design, we see that it's not just logic that we have as human beings. We also have this perception that defies logic, that comes from the intuitive realm, or comes from the spiritual realm. And then there's even a third way of knowing in human design, and that's just pure knowingness. I don't know how I know what I know, I just know, right? And those are very valid ways of knowing. But the world is artificially kind of pushing us to logic. So while we have Mercury moving through the sign of Pisces, we are going to be more easily, I think, able to get into the logic, or get into the intuitive, more instinctual sides of ourselves. And then the symbology of imagery comes up, right? And then we can translate that perhaps into words, but it's going to be a time of dreaminess, a time of thoughtfulness, a time of symbology. And that means that people may feel foggy. Don't be surprised if you feel foggy or more tired while Mercury is in Pisces. And he's going to be in Pisces for an elongated period of time, because he retrogrades here. He makes it all the way to the 27th degree, and then retrogrades backwards to the 12th degree. So between 12 degrees and 27 degrees of Pisces in your chart is going to be the place where Mercury hangs out for quite a while. All right. So that would put it in the mid to the late degrees of the sign. And wherever then Pisces is in your personal chart, this is where the fogginess may erupt, right? This is where the dreaminess is. This is where you may feel more emotional. If you put, let's say Pisces happens to be on your second house, like if this chart were a person, the second house is where Pisces is, then the thoughts around money become more emotional. You may become more apt to emotionally spend money, rather than, logically thinking, well, I can't afford this, but I really want that. And I feel like it would make me feel good. So blah, blah, blah. Right. So we got to watch the emotional connection. There's also this distractedness that comes up with Pisces energy, because, there's sometimes we're crossing into that spiritual realm, the like ethereal, and it's hard to concentrate on what it is that you're doing that's right in front of you when your mind has wandered off into la la land. And we also may become more empathetic, more compassionate to the events that are happening in the outer world, but also within our interpersonal relationships. So because this can sometimes be interpreted as confusion energy, Mercury in Pisces, It's really not so much that, it's just a different operating system. So think about it that way. Mercury is operating in a different way. Now, let's go to Mercury and emotional awareness. So I'm going to take the chart away here for a minute. We'll come back to that if we need to. So this is a very beautiful layer of Mercury being in the sign of Pisces and it's very important because Mercury enters into the sign of Pisces through the gate 30, as I spoke about a few minutes ago. Gate 30 in your human design being the gate of passion and desire, right? In its lowest energy, it's hunger. It's the I want so badly that I'm holding on so tightly, and I only can see then whether or not I have what I want. I can't see the bigger picture because I'm not perceiving it, okay? Now, the mind in the gate 30 is colored by longing. And longing is often an awareness of I don't have what I want rather than I am attracting what I want. Okay, so we've got to keep that in mind. It's also highly emotionally charged. It's on the solar plexus. If you have an open solar plexus, this may feel very different to you than it does to someone who's used to having the gate 30 defined on their solar plexus. So take a look at your human design. If it's an open gate, this energy is now going to be occupied by Mercury and then Venus, or Venus is there too as well right now. It's also future oriented because it's looking ahead. It sees what it has now versus what it desires, and there's a gap, right? There's this gap between what I see I have versus what I'm waiting for. So the questions, for you to pose to yourself is like, what are you mentally craving right now? Or what are you physically craving? Or what are you emotionally craving? And then are you thinking about what you want or what you feel is missing? Because there's a key difference here. Because if you're looking at, if you're focusing on what you desire, it's more attractive in nature, as opposed to when you are focusing on what you feel is missing. Actually, the whole gate is very attractive, right? There's a magnetism here that attracts based on emotional alignment, what it is that you are focusing on. So if you're focusing on what you don't have, that's what you get more of. If you're focusing on what you desire, but you're seeing how that is going to be a part of your life, in other words, you're kind of pretending, then you are attracting that to your life. I hope that makes sense. If you guys have questions about that, let me know. And desire isn't about wanting things so much as it's about wanting the experience of having those things or being that person or being in that role, right? So it's about the experience because the emotional center is experiential. I'm experiencing this emotion. So, and what's really interesting about this is that because that gate is a red flag gate, it means we are really meant to pay attention to that. When any planet moves through it, or if you have it defined in your own personal chart, you are meant to pay attention, stand up straight, look straight ahead. What am I doing? What am I focusing on? Am I focusing on what I don't have, or am I focusing on what I do have? Right? Interestingly enough, the gate 30 on the emotional center sits directly across from the gate 41, the gate of imagination, where the human design new year just was birthed. And it is based on if you can't imagine yourself having or being what it is that you desire, then you cannot create it. So it's an interesting channel in that the human design energy here tells us that if we can't picture a world in peace, can we create a world in peace? And in the main, no, you cannot. And another interesting little factoid, Pluto is sitting at the gate 41. So no matter what, we have the entire channel of anticipation of our desires being made manifest in the world right now, right? Everybody has it. Even if you think you don't have it, you have it, right? Even if it looks like on your human design chart that it's empty, it is now a defining of your solar plexus. It is a defining of your root center because that entire channel is activating. So what can you imagine? Can you imagine and keep there's a level of timing here that's kind of out of our hands as well. It is asking for us to keep focusing on what it is that we want to create rather than focusing on what it is that we don't have. And then over time and with clarity, we keep moving toward the things or the experience that we want. Okay, I hope this is all making sense. So the key distinction here with Mercury moving into Pisces is that the mind becomes problematic only when it's trying to control how the desire or the want unfolds, or the creation or the imagination unfolds, right? I think I could put it in easier words. Your job is to determine the what, and the universe's job is to deliver the how, right? You keep focused on what is it you desire and keep it light, right? Because you don't know, the universe might have some better way of bringing it to you. The how is the nature of the universe, right? And your job then is to just follow the signposts, the feelings, right? I feel like that's a good way to go. I hope this makes sense. Let me check on everybody here. I got to go back a ways. Joan Dirty, good morning. Holy moly. Okay. Christine, is there such thing as a Mercury return? Yes. Natal Pisces, Sun and Mercury in the 11th. So every year, all the planets return, and some of them aren't yearly. Some of them are going to be, 29 years, like Saturn. All the planets have a return. And Mercury's is roughly 88 days, right? So roughly 90 days would be 3 months. And that's how long it takes for it to go completely around the chart. Spooky. And nobody's home, and my remote, my radio, my walkie-talkie is going off. It does this to me all the time. Yesterday, some girl was telling me to F off in the radio. She wasn't talking to me, but she was talking. I had to shut the thing off because I was like, okay, I'm not listening to this. Okay. So does that make sense? So every year, at least once a year, you are having a Mercury return. Okay. All right. And when it returns, then it's an opportunity for you to up-level your mind, your perceptions and your thinking patterns and what have you. Londa, good morning, sweetheart. Seahawks, indeed. Karen's Corner, good morning. Jackie, happy Friday, listening at 2x speed. Oh my gosh, I'm already talking fast. This must be chipmunk words, as you say. Go Hawks Jones says, would you say it's our second house or what house we have Taurus? What house you have Taurus? Right. I was using the example of the chart that I was showing where it's just based on where, what time I drew up the chart. But in your own personal chart, you have Taurus, you have Pisces, you have Aquarius somewhere. So you have this series of houses in your chart, areas of your life, houses are, that things are happening, right? Or where the energy is planted. Right now, Aquarius is the main theme of energy, but it's shifting over the next few days into Piscean energy, actually in the next couple of weeks. So I hope that clears that up. And I miss you too, London. We're doing well. Jackie says, woohoo, left many groups, deleted many people, logged out of IG, Threads, Snapchat. I'm right on track. Awesome. Willow Rose, good morning. Sarah, Raven's Eye. Aquarius is my first house. I've definitely felt like there's been more pressure. I have Pisces in my second, just like the chart that we drew. How interesting, Sarah, that you would join this morning's conversation at a time when the chart of the day, or the chart that I drew up for the day, mirrors your own, right? Like almost like you need to hear this kind of message. And so in your second house, you've been feeling a lot of anxiety and nerves, the good and bad in the air, right? And if I remember correctly, I think you're a projector, I think, in your human design. So you're taking in a lot of energy from the world around you. So your challenge, if you choose to accept it, is to release all of that, right? To just use it as, the background energy. But for you, focus on the second house means that you're really focusing in on your values and what is correct for you, and calling in your self-worth, your self-esteem, and your self-confidence to be the best you there. Now, it's also a financial house. So if you're nervous or anxious about money, this is a really good time for you to get practical with it, right? Go looking into the dark corners of the budget and make sure that you're not hemorrhaging money somewhere, or, that you've made great investments and things like that. Kind of be proactive about those things so they don't live in the fear field. So I hope that makes sense for you. Natasha, good morning. I wanted to be someone in your life to say you are loved and you're doing a good job. And you do that. How awesome. And you work with children. You get to be there in that loving angelic presence for them all day. I love it. So you are living that, Natasha. Tina, intention, intention, and intention brings more love. How good can it get? Like, those are the kinds of phrases we need. How much better could this be? What more is possible, right? There's the possibility thinking as well here. And Jacqueline says, I have 41 in my radiance. 41 is my pearl, right? Maybe that's why I'm just like, I got this. I get this energy. And 30.6 is your personality midheaven. So this is an important thing to your expression in the world itself, right? Radiance means this is what you're shining outward to the world. And since Human Design Gene Keys doesn't use the midheaven, what can I do to help guide me? If you go to Genetic Matrix, I think you can draw up a chart without having to be a member or anything like that. It will be you can find a chart for you about your midheaven and your ascendant, and I think even descendant and IC. So check there on that site and see if you can find that. And if you can, then look into the deeper recesses of that particular gate or gene key of the midheaven to kind of unlock the shadow, the gift, and the siddhi of your career, of your outward facing reputation and so forth. That would be a good place for you to go. Good morning, Jacqueline Tyler. Good to see you out there. Christine says, thanks, Janet. You're welcome. And Jackie says, oh my God, 12th house. I just heard the song, Strange Things Are Happening. That's our lives, right? And think about this. We're moving into Piscean waters. And in Piscean waters, it gets dreamy. It gets intuitive. It gets empathic. And it's unconditional love that comes through Pisces, right? It's the end of the zodiac year. So we're coming through to the end of the year and the real year, right? And what comes next is just right there for us, right? So it's our great opportunity to really dream what it is we want into reality, right? To get clear about that. Sarah, that makes sense. Yes, I'm a projector. This energy has definitely resonated. I recently got a promotion, yay, with a raise, and my manager is pushing me to bring more of objective ideas for the group. How Aquarian is that? To have Aquarius in your first house, right? That is exactly what people see that is possible from you. So go for it. And you are most welcome, Sarah. Okay. Now, let's plant the seed of what comes next here with our friend Mercury in Pisces, and that is the retrograde. So next week, we'll be talking more about Mercury retrograde. It doesn't really happen until later in the month, but let's just look here, kind of plant these seeds. Mercury will retrograde from 27 degrees of Pisces backward to 12 degrees, as I said a little bit earlier. And Pisces retrogrades are dissolving uncertainty, or certainty, dissolving certainty. So it's like what you thought you knew, you suddenly don't. The direction you thought you were going is suddenly looking doubtful, right? There's this kind of joke that the universe is playing here that says, but I have a better idea of what's coming next for you, or of what direction to move in. It may be a time for you to revisit your dreams and your hopes and your memories and your emotional truths. And also, it blurs timelines, where in Aquarius we had a future orientation to the timeline with Mercury. In Pisces, we don't. And when it turns retrograde, those lines about timing are all blurred. It kind of bleeds together, future, past, present, right? So we have to do more work to stay in the present moment. And this Mercury retrograde that we're coming to won't really ask us to fix anything in our lives. I think it's not going to be a time maybe where I'm not going to say that your personal computer or information doesn't get messed up, because it might, but it will ask us to feel what we have skipped over. and then maybe to do a revisit to that emotional landscape. So, for example, in a relationship, if you skipped over the emotions of a failed marriage, perhaps, or a failed relationship, a familial relationship that isn't going well, then this would be a great time to revisit those emotions. You can kind of step back even and just view that and make peace with that. And, you know, what happens here in a Mercury retrograde anyway is that what begins to surface mentally is going to have this emotional tone to it. So taking that look at the emotional side of the thought processes that you're going through. And then the themes around those will be emotionally charged. And then what feels unfinished or unnamed is also something that may emerge during Mercury's retrograde. And he spends that entire retrograde in the same sign. In fact, this year, I believe he spends all of his retrogrades are in water. So, water, 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 water. We're going into the depths, we're going into the emotional landscape. So interesting to find this happening in the year before we jump into the emotional solar plexus evolution next year, 2027. All right. So, how's everybody doing? Good? Good, good, good. Now, let's go to Venus in Aquarius squaring Uranus and Taurus. So you might remember back last week or the week before when I met with Tam and we did the overview of the month of February. We talked about the fact that all of the inner planets were going to move through a square to the planet Uranus. And that's kind of a weird pattern, right? That all the inner planets are so close together because they're all in Aquarius, right? That they're all going to square the planet Uranus in the final couple of degrees of Taurus. So squares are tension. So there was a tension already. We had the square from Mercury to Uranus. So our minds having to work through a minefield, perhaps, of different thoughts and upsetting ideas or just the information overload that's coming in from outside of us. Now, this weekend, Sunday, we have Venus in the square to Uranus. Now, remember, Venus represents your values. She represents money. She represents relationships and love and your self-worth. And she will be in those later degrees of Aquarius because she too shifts into Pisces, but next week. And Uranus is disruption, liberation, awakening. He's truth, like truth bombs or truth shocks, right, that come in during this period of time. And the square is friction that reveals something unavoidable. That's the nature of squares. In order for us to go forward, sometimes in order for the new beginning or even just after the new beginning, the major aspect pattern that happens is the square, the tension that, before you can go to that next level. But this is not necessarily about drama. So I'm not thinking, necessarily drama in your personal life or drama in the outer world. I mean, there's a lot of drama out there on its own. But this is more about an awareness of the values and the relationships you're in and how that needs to be shaken up or released liberation-wise, or how you need to awaken to how that is working out in your life. So you may have this weekend some sudden realizations about your relationships or about you within the context of the relationships that you're in, and all kinds of relationships, primarily love relationships, but it could be with colleagues and it could be with friends and it could be with your significant others, with family. Also sudden realizations about your financial habits. Uranus is in Taurus, a sign that is ruled by Venus, which is all about money, relationships, love, right? And value and worth. So they are tied in together here. So Uranus might be bringing up those financial things, those habits that you've gotten into about spending money or about how you feel around attracting enough for yourself. Because, I say financial because money is what we primarily use to exchange with others, but it is also other resources that you have, that you can access. And it's also about, I think, what you no longer value and how do you release that? How do you let go of what you no longer value and move, off toward what you value? Now, there can be restlessness without a clear reason for that restlessness, because each of you are going to have this tension going on in your chart somewhere, right? Wherever it is that you have Aquarius and Taurus, there is tension. In, let's say, Sarah's chart, Sarah, that is going to be in your first house, and tension in maybe the fifth house of the chart, and, or sorry, the fourth house of the chart. And that might mean the pressure to work toward a solid foundation of some sort, right? Or the habits and so forth that have not supported a solid foundation for you. So this may be you having to change some things in your life. Now, there is a desire for freedom and space and authenticity that's also running through this. And for most people right now, I think, as we look ahead to what comes up for 2026, a lot of that has to do with your creative energy, with your creative identity. Who do you want to be? Your sovereignty, your agency, right? Who are you? And who do you want to be? And how do you allow for others around you to live out their own agency, right? And their own sovereignty. Now, you also might hear this: I can't pretend this works for me any longer. I can't pretend because it's not working. I can't just ignore it. I can't pretend. I have to do something, right? This is the energy that becomes anxiety if you don't make the change that you need to in order to be aligned with your values, self-worth, with the awakening and liberation energies that are being required of you at this moment. Now, there's something else important here to ground for yourself, and that it's that Uranus brings insight first. So it might be the dawning of the aha moment that comes first. So you may not have the clear direction yet that insight takes you to. It could just be I realize I've been stuck in this relationship and working so hard to keep this relationship going, and it's not working. It's devaluing me or the other, right? So the insight may come first. And awareness doesn't require immediate change, not necessarily, because remember, we're headed to Mercury retrograde. We're still in the dream time. We are not yet in that first zodiac sign of Aries, starting the new year. So it might be just awareness that comes, an awareness that some kind of action needs to take place, right? So keep that in mind. I think sometimes it's more the awareness is tougher than the action, because once the awareness comes, then we realize we're going to have to take some kind of action. And that may scare the hell out of us. It may prompt us to go, whoa, back way up, right? From the action that needs to be taken. But just hold the space for what the insight might be drawing you toward, without feeling like you have to go break up with that person today, or quit that job today, or make that big change. Just sit with that, right? Sit with that. Now, this is nervous system energy too, because Uranus rules the nervous system, and Venus and Uranus can feel very activating. They can feel very very much like something needs to happen. And that means that some people may want to retail therapy their way through the anxiety. So be careful of this, right? You may become impulsively spending. You may become emotionally detached, like this feels too much, like got to step back out of the feeling. You may shake things up in your life just to feel the relief from the anxiety, which means that just because you've had the awakening, there's not real consciousness to it yet. So while the activation is happening and the awakening, the consciousness might not completely be there yet, like the full consciousness of the next steps that you need to take. So pause before reacting to anything this weekend. Let the insight of what you might get land first, right? Give it some time. And freedom, liberation, and awakening doesn't mean that you have to destruct your life, right? Or blow things up. It can happen incrementally, but it has to have consciousness attached to it. And so many times when we are impulsive, we lack the consciousness of what it is that we're doing. And then later we look back and go, yeah, I should have probably done that differently. I should have waited, right? So do yourself a favor and, hold yourself accountable for response energy versus reactive energy. Now, the emotional weather here through human design is the same pretty much as Mercury's, because Venus is in the gate 30, the gate of passion, while Uranus is in the gate 8, the gate of contribution. So emotions are informational. And this is the key to the evolution, by the way, of our human design solar plexus, is that emotional energy is informational. Right now, we look at it as something to react to. As time goes on, we become far more aware of the information encoded in the emotion that we're feeling. But not all emotions require our immediate action, right? Sometimes it's just a call for you to start observing your feelings about something and whether or not that you are headed in the right direction or not, right? Because an emotional low could be a call that you're moving in the wrong direction, or that your thought processes are driving you into the wrong thoughts, the wrong creations. So it's informational, right? And if you have a defined solar plexus, then you are broadcasting emotion. It's time for you to ride the wave of whatever it is that's coming for you. If you have an undefined solar plexus, then you're noticing the amplification of emotional energy because you are taking it all in, amplifying it and rebroadcasting emotion, or potentially rebroadcasting emotion that wasn't even yours to start with. Response requires time. So feelings are like the weather, not your marching orders, right? They tell you what's the temperature, right? It looks sunny and bright out there, but I see ice on the roof, so it's cold. So I'm not going to go outside in my t-shirt, right? I'm looking at the weather going, okay, I think I need a jacket or coat, gloves maybe, right? So when you're looking out at the things that are awakening within you, what is it showing you? What is it teaching you about you in that moment, right? It's not asking you to necessarily take action. So the desire and the timing are the key here, right? Gate 30 really teaches us about how desire fuels life, how desire fuels our actions, and that when we are attached to that desire, it can create suffering because we're human beings and we tend to look out there at our desires and see how our desire isn't manifesting, and versus being in gratitude for what it is that we have in this moment, for the blessing of the desire that fuels us to keep moving forward, right? So the weekend energy between Venus and Uranus asks us if we can feel the desire without forcing an outcome. Can we let the longing for something, for someone, for an experience inform us without running the show, without running the next steps that you are going to take? All right. So if we bring the energy of the weekend together here, we see that Mercury softens the mind. Doesn't make you daft. It's just softening the mind. Desire is coloring our thoughts. And Mercury, after he moves into the gate or passes out of 30, he moves into the 55, which is all about having the faith that your desires will manifest. It may not manifest exactly how you think it will, but it will. Having faith and abundance, right? Having faith in the abundance of spirit. Venus will also move into 55 in a few days after that. So next week sometime, and will also bring that need for faith that our desires are manifesting perfectly for us. And Venus and Uranus reveals where freedom wants to emerge in our lives, and also that nothing needs to be decided this weekend. You do not have to land on one side of the aisle or the other this weekend, but you need to become awakened or aware of the tension within you and what is it pointing you toward, right? So this weekend, there probably isn't much clarity. And it's about attuning. It's about intuiting. And clarity will become something that happens because you listened. You felt those emotions. You listened to your intuition. All right. Questions? Let's see here. Good morning, TD Hawk. Oh, I got to go back. Good morning, Paulette Peasley. Good morning, Nicole Duke. Great to have you with us this morning. And let's see, Natasha, funny, I just sent a text to my husband that I wrote last night that I needed to reread this morning because my emotions needed to be said about something that happened in our relationship. I'm glad I got a chance to reread it to make sure my intention and my clarity was what I was intending. Definitely a good thing, right? Because even though we are not yet even in the shadow of Mercury retrograde, it's a good habit to get into, right? To read what you've written before you send it, just in case, okay? In Tamara's chart, Taurus rules the fourth house, but is in house 8 ruled by Virgo, and Aquarius rules house 1. Okay, now I'm confused. Wow, I definitely was impulsive when I purchased a vintage silk scarf online yesterday. It is gorgeous and only $20, but why did I do that? It was weird. I need to get groceries today. Arrgh. Right? Not that buying a $20 scarf is a problem, right? It's only a problem if all you had was $20 and now you don't have enough money to buy groceries today, right? That's the key, right? So, but the awareness of what it is that buying of the scarf satisfied for you, right? What did it satisfy for you? It doesn't have to be, you don't have to be so pragmatic that you can only purchase things that you desire that are of a grounded, practical nature. That isn't necessary, right? That's not quite it, because desire doesn't necessarily work on just the practical. The desire is really emotional, right? So something about the scarf, perhaps, Tamara, evoked a certain emotion in you. And I mean, surely it could have been just retail therapy. I mean, okay, right? Retail therapy. It was $20. You loved it. You got it. Okay, right? Now be okay with that. You made that decision. You've done that. There's no sense going back and beating yourself up about something like that either, because that's not called for. But the awareness of what it was that you were doing and why you did it, why you chose that moment to buy that, is important. What was the value in the purchase, right? What did it do? How did it make you feel? Awareness will be on the lookout to not do that again. But why? There's another question. Why not do that again? I'm not saying go out and just spend $20 on every scarf you come to, but you also don't want to censor yourself and say, like, what is it that you weren't worth the $20 you spent on that scarf? Was it an awareness that you purchased that from an emotional reaction to something else that was happening in your life or not happening in your life? Did it fill a void, right? Then you know maybe that an emotion reaction was taking place because it's filling some kind of void. But if it's truly something that you desired and you saw it and it evoked an emotional response that was of the positive nature, then what's the problem? Are you not worthy of having something that's beautiful that you wanted? Is only groceries the thing that you can purchase? And again, of course, that's separate to the point of if you only had $20 and groceries are going to be more, that you would be going without. Value, like value choices. We're always in an evaluation of the things that we purchase. When we have Venus and Uranus coming together, actually Venus even moving into Pisces, she next week goes into Pisces, we'll be evaluating the emotional landscape, of what we are doing at all times. Karen, I'm just breathing until we pass this next eclipse and Pluto completes this transit of my first house. First house Chiron and Pholus. I'm not familiar. I've heard Pholus. I don't even know what it represents, but always that awareness, right? Awareness of what's happening in your chart, or what's happening in your life and how is it showing up, right? What's it teaching you or, leading you to, right? Those are important things. Okay. Now, I also wanted to bring up something else, and I'm going to bring up the chart again one more time. I have just a few minutes here, but I wanted to show you in this chart. If you look in the upper left corner, I circled the galactic center, and the galactic center is at 27 degrees some minutes right now of Sagittarius. And on the Uranus side, Uranus is at 27 degrees of Taurus. And that puts the relationship between Uranus and Taurus and our connection to freedom, liberation, awakening, and shock into an inconjunct or a quincunx with the galactic center. And herein lies like a problem, I think, for humanity at this moment, because a quincunx is always asking for us to adjust and to keep that adjustment going on. It can bring up energies around sacrifice and around suffering and around having to have these very volatile events that are going on in the world as awakening tools. Now, the galactic center is the source of the evolution energies in our solar system, and in fact, it's where all of the highly charged neutrinos that carry mutation energy written in their very DNA, how those come in and stream to the Earth, but not only the Earth, all of this solar system. It holds the gamma rays and the other cosmic rays that actually are the agents of mutation. So the galactic center, very important here, as it is at once, because it's a black hole, swallowing the old and spitting out the new, right? If you think of it as this conveyor belt of evolution, that's what I think of as the galactic center in a chart. And you all have the galactic center somewhere. It's going to land somewhere in the 23 to 27 degree mark of Sagittarius. So this is where the largest evolution energy is for each one of you personally. Okay. If this person, or if this chart were a person, this person would be going through consistent evolutions around networks of people, connections, friendships, associations, their dream, and their vision for the future. And in Sagittarius, this would be someone who's always on a quest, maybe for new experiences with people. Now, remember that Uranus is a planet that's all about awakening and shock and new things, right, that are happening, freeing us from the old so that we can entertain the new. And he is planted in a sign of Taurus, who likes the old, who likes the comfort zone, not necessarily the old, the comfort zone, and is stuck in some respects, right, is yet a steady presence, right? Taurus is a steady presence. And here with Uranus going on, there may have been for people in the Taurus part of their charts a lot of changes. And it could be changes that you didn't know you needed or wanted, but there they are, right? Uranus bringing those changes up. And in a difficult connection to the galactic center, it may mean that we are all having a little bit of trouble integrating the evolutionary intent here in the solar system of the Milky Way galaxy, right? And that can lead to turmoil. It can lead to excesses. It can lead to this polarization feeling that we have in the world, and remember, the intent of the universe that we live in is about love. And if you look out to the world that we see right now, it's not very loving. We see a lot of damage going on in relationships. We see a lot of damage going on to the environment. We see a lot of damage going on in relationships between countries or nations. And it means that we're not integrating the new energies from the galactic center. So I just thought this was something to bring up, because over the next 7.5 years, once Uranus moves into Gemini and the galactic center, Sagittarius point, are across from one another. So we'll be coming to this point, I think, over the next 7 years where we have to really embody, we have to choose change. And if we don't, which we will, because that's just the evolutionary intent, but if for some reason a person did not accept the changes that are going on, then there could be some drastic consequences in one's life, right? Through the way that you are living your life. And when I say drastic change, I mean change toward love energy, right? And love energy itself, the bigger love energy, doesn't see race. It doesn't see political party. It doesn't see one nation over another. It doesn't see ugly versus beautiful. It just sees everything as love, as an integrated purpose, right? So another great thing for all of us, I think, to to work with in our lives is about love energy. How loving are you to yourself, to the people around you, in your thoughts, in your emotions, right? Love energy. Love is the way. All right, let's see any last questions. Karen, I'm just breathing. Oh, I read that one. Gotcha. And Karen says, my mother's name was Phyllis, a little mountain that opens a molehill. Good or difficult. I am downsizing, been listing scarves to sell, Tamara says. So then you bought a new scarf to fill in. Maybe you are letting go of scarves that no longer are the color or the vision of what you hold for yourself now, and maybe the one you just bought does hold something about the new vision you have for yourself, right? Who knows, right? If only you will know, because it's the awakening and the awareness that you bring to it. All right, everybody, thank you so much for joining me. Don't forget, register for the Astrology of 2026, happening on February 21st at 9 a.m. That is a Saturday morning, 9 a.m. Pacific, 12 noon Pacific or Eastern time. And there's the link. You might have to copy and paste that link. Take care, everybody. Have a great weekend. Go Hawks. Bye for now.